All right. Welcome to episode 39 of Black and Azul. I'm Jamon Moore, joined by Alex Morgan, the returning Alex Morgan.
Happy to be back.
And Joel Soria. We got to talk about our off season very quickly. Alex, how was yours?
Mine was restful, thank you very much. Looking forward to now my 6th season covering the Quakes, and hopefully it'll be a good one.
So we have obviously a very exciting finish at Earthquakes Stadium today, one that really we hadn't seen anything quite like in the history of Earthquakes Stadium. The Goonie days were long before we got to Earthquakes Stadium. The last free kick goal that happened for the Earthquakes was back on May 18th of 2013. And now Osvaldo Alanis, new player just signed from Chivas Guadalajara on loan, comes in and has the winning goal. Joel Soria, your reaction when you saw that ball go in the back of the net?
I obviously, like everyone else, I was stunned. Beautiful goal by Alanis. Not something that I hadn't seen from him before, though. Obviously, as he stated, he's had a couple, and we've seen it as well throughout CONCACAF Champions League, Liga MX, regular season. I thought he was the man of the match. Way before that goal even came. He's a complete center back, a type of defender that the Quakes have never had, ever. Versatile, can play from the back, can put 50 yard through balls with ease, has really good vision, has a lot of confidence on the field, leadership. He's an excellent all-around player. I think he's a difference maker for the Quakes, and today he showed it.
It seemed like he was well into the game, maybe even the star of the game before the free kick from the Quake side. Mm-hmm. The passing, the versatility, the ability to track into different situations and to understand, already having played in Matias' system, what he should do, seemed like second nature. He seemed like he was just getting right back on the horse, Alex Morgan.
And for me, what stood out was how well he shut down Jozy Altidore. Altidore was getting very frustrated on the field. You could tell he was, exchanging comments with the coach, showing his frustration. And that's because Alanis was shutting him down so well. He was, staying on his back. And even though Altidore is physically more imposing, he was, putting his body on the line and winning that battle.
Yeah, so it ends in a 2-2 draw. It's one of those, I guess, draws that feels a little bit like the win under the circumstances.
Tastes like a victory. Sure.
Certainly, the way that the reactions were after the game from our interview with Greg Vanny, as well as our interviews with Matias Almeida and the players, definitely it was a tale of two different locker rooms from what we were able to see. How did you feel about the fact that we got to draw out of this? We kind of predicted this last week, did we not?
Yeah, it was going to be a difficult task to take on, such a brilliant, talented team like Toronto FC, who came out and, I thought put together a formidable performance. Obviously, the Quakes cut them some slack there at the very end with that Alanis wonder goal, but obviously it's always going to be like that, right? When the losing team, in this case is Toronto FC, that goes back home with only a point, where well could have been 3, and the Quakes walk out with a precious point. They were practically out of the game, dying minutes. Alanis puts that forward, and the rest is history.
And compared to the start of last season, where the Quakes dropped their first game at then Avaya Stadium, Matias Almeida felt like this was a step forward if you compare the start of last season to the start of this season. Obviously, the result slightly better, although it had to be heroically rescued at the very last second. Alex Morgan, what were your impressions of the way that the game played out?
Yeah, Matias talked about in his post-match press conference how much improvement that he saw between this opening game and last year's opening game. To be honest, it was a sloppy game. The Quakes didn't play particularly well throughout the 90 minutes, but they put themselves in a position to be able to rescue that point late on. And look, you could clearly see there was rust. The passes were errant. There wasn't enough energy. But systematically looking at the team as a system, I think that tactically they were pretty solid for most of the game. You weren't seeing things like last year when they were still adapting to the man marking system, where Tommy Thompson tracking halfway across the field. They weren't caught out of position as much, and there are still obviously clearly, especially with the set piece goal and with the early in the second half allowing that goal. Where Tommy Thompson lost his man, the Toronto were able to counterattack through the middle. There are kinks that needed to be worked out, but this is definitely an improvement.
Initially, it looked like in the first half that it was sloppy from both teams. Neither side was really getting any shots on goal at that point. And then all of a sudden, there's a corner kick, and we see a kind of a scuffling in the box, and the referee actually stops everything, goes over, and he talks to Andy Rios, and he talks to Jozy Altidore, and then backs away. And effectively, you see this scene play out where it just looks like Andy Rios is grabbing and throwing Jozy Altidore to the ground. At the time, looked like very much an earned penalty. Upon maybe further reflection for the video that the Earthquakes showed on their social media, it looks like maybe Rios was grabbed. What was your reaction in the moment, Joel?
I wasn't close. I wasn't up close. I couldn't really tell from what I saw from the replay. It looked like Jozy Altidore, used his experience inside the box. He kind of imposed himself on Rios, and was able to hug him, and they both went down. Obviously, in that situation, depending on where the referee is standing, 9 out of 10 times it's going to be called. He used his experience, and the Quakes were fell short to start the game, but good.
And I would say that sequence that you outline is very important, because the ref had stopped the play. He had just stopped the play for tussling in the box. It looked like Altidore had ended up on the ground. So he had talked to Rios and Altidore, saying, no more of this. If I see anything more, it's going to be a foul either way. And so that's what you talk about with the game awareness. Altidore then, and from the angle that the San Jose Earthquakes posted of it on Twitter, live, it looks, we couldn't really tell what was going on in the tussle. But there's an angle that the Quakes showed on their Twitter in which you can clearly see Altidore is grabbing Rios' arm and then throwing himself to the ground with Rios, essentially diving. And so that's really good game awareness, because in that situation, I don't think the referee from the angle that he had could tell the difference. And in theory, it was reviewed by VAR, but we're unsure if the VAR had the angle that the Quakes posted on Twitter, because that was really the only angle from which you could tell what Altidore is doing.
And I actually caught Andy Rios in the tunnel right after the game, and I asked him, I said, did Jozy Altidore grab your arm and pull you down? And his response, and his English isn't the best, but his response was, yes, that's what he did. And that's what he told me. Obviously, he's going to feel, a bit hurt by that and a bit done in. But if one of the things I think that is still getting a bit confusing to fans in the league is, well, just because the referee didn't do one of these things and go and look at the replay, or didn't put his hand to his ear, means that the video assistant referee didn't take a look at it. But Joel Soria, every single one of these situations is actually being looked at. And what is the process? Can you help us with your knowledge, best as you can, of the process of what happens in these scenarios, and when do we actually go through VAR reviews and such?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, I think any play that is potentially that can potentially lead to a goal is going to be reviewed by VAR, right? Mm-hmm. So anything inside of the box or anything that's leading in an attacking sequence is able to be reviewed. Now, as far as I know, the head referee nor any of the other referees need to address the fans or anyone in the stadium. They simply have an earpiece in. They get told, hey, we're going to have to review this, you're going to have to take a look at this, or we play on. And in this case, I think it was the latter of the two options that happened. Sure. They made the call, and that's it.
And it's actually interesting how VAR is changing the way they ref the game now. Today, for the first time, I noticed the the linesmen were making offsides calls really late. They were making letting the play run on before they letting the play finish before they raised their flag. But in this case, we have to assume they looked at it for sure because it was a penalty.
Yeah, there was definitely 2 or 3 different offside today that were called, that where it did feel like a very late reaction. In fact, at one point, there was an offside call where the assistant referee was far down the line and actually raised the flag at a point that he was nowhere close to where the original offside was called. So we have a kind of a sloppy first half, but the penalty happens a bit before the midway point, and Greg Vandy is forced to make a substitution, bringing on Richie Larea in the second half. Pretty quickly, the Quakes have kind of a defensive breakdown, a transition point. And I think, Joel Soria, it feels like a situation that, if you have a player like Judson in the game, and we understand that maybe he's not yet fit for a full game, and that's a decision maybe that Matias Almeida felt he had to make in not starting him. But without him, there did seem to be a bit of a hole in the middle of the pitch at times, and Toronto FC capitalized.
Absolutely. There was more than one hole. The team, frankly, was disjointed for the majority of the game. Seemed lethargic, rusty, whatever you want to call it. It seemed like the team hadn't really had a solid, preseason in the fold. Toronto capitalized on that. They exploited a disjointed back line, and it gave them a big boost. But throughout the match, I think the Quakes were able to kind of regroup themselves and play it, not in the most aesthetically pleasing way, but they were able to move the ball forward and have some chances, as well as Toronto FC, obviously.
And it looked pretty dire at that point. The Quakes were down 2-0, but it didn't take very long for them to find the response. Again, the assist man, Christian Espinoza, who told us after the game in the locker room that he was being double-teamed, and we saw it happen a few times. He was being double-teamed throughout the match. Every time he would get on the ball, he'd have 2 defenders on him. Mm-hmm. And his ability to create something, though, shone through as he got an assist to Andy Rios that's basically deflected off of Rios. It's a good finish, but most of the work in that situation is being done by Christian Espinoza. Shades of 2019 already.
And as far as I'm concerned, he gets the assist on Alanis' goal too, because he won the free kick. I think this was Christian Espinoza. Showed how valuable he was to this team. On the other side, Denny Husen played on the left, which I'm sure we'll talk about. Andy Rios struggled to do much up top, and then Vaca was really absent this game. So everything was going through Christian Espinoza, everything positive for the Quakes. And for that first goal, he manages, he shut down in the first half, as you say. He's been double-teamed, but he finds a one piece of space. Jackson Ewell, I think it was, or it might have been Alanis, sprays a long diagonal ball out wide to him. They're always looking for that ball to see if he has space, and he puts in a quick cross. And I think you're giving Rios's finish a little short shrift. He managed at acrobatic at full stretch to get a toe on that to direct it into the top corner. So that's a really important goal. And I think it changed the momentum. The Quakes are then put on Chris Wondolowski. They get Carlos Fierro on the pitch, Shea Salinas, another attacking sub, and they turn the game around. They put themselves in a situation where they can salvage the draw. And we can talk about Alanis' goal a little more. That's not something that's out of the blue. That's something that Christian Espinoza says they practiced during midweek. It's a known quality that Alanis has. He scored in his career. One in particular free kick goal was against the Seattle Sounders in 2018 in the CONCACAF Champions League. That's a brilliant left-footed free kick. So they're practicing this during midweek. They're saying that, from that angle, he had no doubt that he would be shooting. Either it goes in like it did, or they're looking for a rebound. But I asked him, do you have any doubt in that situation? It was a really tight angle on that right side. And he says every time he is shooting from that situation, because he knows that's well within his capabilities to score a goal like that.
And I want to get into, in just a little bit, guys, I want to talk about the lineup today. It was a different look. In fact, I got some information from Jesse Fiorinelli in the elevator heading down to Matias Almeida's press conference after the game about this particular formation and configuration of players. So let's get to that in just a little bit. But the Quakes do try to change a few things up. They make a couple subs. Still feels really sloppy. In fact, we see a situation where Guram Kasia just passes the ball almost directly out of bounds with really, in stoppage time, and it seems like that's it. Yeah, it happened more than once, right? And it seems like that's it for the game. But then you just get this quality that we see with Alanis's free kick. You see the creation of Christian Espinoza to create that particular situation and to create that free kick. It was really a good last couple minutes, and we talked a little bit with Christian and Alanis both after the game about how this goal was set up, Joel Soria.
Yeah, more than the last couple of minutes being good. I think it was a good showing by some key players, right? Like Alanis, like Christian Espinoza, who are bound to have good seasons and need to have good seasons if the Quakes want to stay afloat. You need these players to perform. This is where the money is being poured into, as well as Andy Rios being one of the others. It's paying dividends thus far. Those two players. I guess you can say Andy Rios was also a new integration, right? He did come in last season, but was very limited. And Alanis, we can keep talking about him all night, but he really was a difference maker today. If it wasn't for him, the Quakes would be, going back home with no points.
And you and I witnessed a really interesting scene right after the game in the tunnel where Alanis was really embraced by people who you could tell were fans of his. Probably local Mexican fans, Chivas fans, people who they knew Alanis and they were chanting his name, and he was going over there and spending some time with them, meeting them, taking pictures with them. From your perspective, Joel, what does a player like Alanis really kind of bring to the Earthquakes that they've kind of lacked in touching this community? Because you really could feel it after the game.
Yeah, Alanis is a hot commodity within the Mexican market. For being a defender, he does have a lot of market pull. I guess you can categorize it that way. There aren't many defenders now that Rafa Marquez is gone that have made, a career for themselves the way that Alanis has. He tried his luck abroad, actually completed a transfer to Getafe, and then last seconds, Getafe decided to pull the plug on him. Getafe now, I don't know if you guys keep up with La Liga, but they're a top 3 team, and they're playing Europa League. So then he went on to Real Oviedo, which is owned by Carlos Slim Helú, one of the richest men in the world, happens to be Mexican. Gets about a season and a half there, does well, returns to Chivas on a good wages. That doesn't pan out for all the internal reasons that were going on at Chivas. Gets a lifeline by Matias Almeida, his good friend, and it works out. I think it ticks a couple of different boxes for the Quakes, right? On marketing sense, also on the field. He provides a lot of leadership, a lot of moral guidance for youngsters. He's well-respected player, through and through professional, and for being a center back, he's got a lot of qualities that others don't. He can move forward. He can play with both feet. Like I said, he has a really, really powerful left-footed shot. Highly skilled for his position, I think. And he's also a good player when it comes to speaking to the press. So I think it was a phenomenal signing.
I mean, look, I don't know how many other center backs can score a goal like that, right?
Not many.
And I think that one thing this tells me is that the Quakes need to draw more fouls. Espinoza is good at drawing fouls down that right side, touching the ball beyond people in drawing fouls. But guys like Vaco try to stay on their feet as long as possible. And so I think the Quakes haven't really had a designated set piece taker like that, at least one that's scoring goals like that. Honestly, in the entire time I've been covering the team, Matias Perez Garcia was maybe the last one.
Well, Danny Husen was touted as a good free kick taker coming in from Groningen, but that never worked out. Magnus Eriksson also has good free kicking abilities, but
hit the bar once last season, I think.
They've all fallen short, and it's ironically Alanis on his first on his first attempt. He buries it.
It's an important facet of a team, and I think it could be a big strength for the Quakes going forward.
They haven't had it, so I think it's giving them an edge that they haven't seen in so long. You know,
How about
always
these?
welcome.
How about these loan deals, Alex? Because last season you see 2 loan players come in and really took a team from 2018 that was the worst in the league, record-wise for sure, and 2 players really kind of changed their fortunes, along with bringing in Almeida, which was Judson, and bringing in Christian Espinoza. Now another loan player, Alanis, from Chivas, another loan player that looks like is going to make a big impact on this team.
Yeah. Look, that's Jesse Fiorinelli's modus operandi. All 3 of us sat down with him over the offseason, and he outlined the way he does business, the way he runs the San Jose Earthquakes as the general manager. And these year-long loan deals are a big part of that. He brought in last year Judson, Christian Espinosa. Those were 2 linchpins for the team. Those were 2 of their most important players. Can
I say something real quick though? I don't think the Quakes had a plan B. They didn't have a way around it. There was only one way of bringing Alanis, and that was signing him to a 1-year loan. He's too expensive. I don't think the Quakes were going to open the purse for a center back of his age and pay him DP wages. Sure. He's 3rd highest paid player at Chivas. I'm sure is making a considerable amount of money for a center back, his age specifically. I don't think there was a way around it, but yes,
I think the loan. That is also true, but I still think the loan deal suits the Quakes in that
it's
right. They're not sure every signing is going to pan out. This gives them the opportunity to see what they're getting before they spend that big money, like they did with Espinosa.
Okay. All right, so we were able to get to the locker room and be able to get some comments, and that took a bit of time, and we would have liked to have been able to do more video for you. If you'd like to be able to get this, we will obviously share as much as we can on our social media accounts, and also with Quakes Epicenter, we have a video sharing that we do as well. So I'd like you to be able to see all that. The one clip that we were able to quickly get before the show and put together is actually from Greg Vanney, because I thought this was a really interesting away coach's perspective, someone who just got burnt by the Matias Almeida system in a way from this game, and his comments were not that flattering. So if we could roll the footage of that particular video right now.
How many San Jose games do you see that don't look sloppy? It's the way they play. They man-on-man chase you around the field, and it sets up for a sloppy game, and a lot of things are dealt with in transition, set pieces, things like that. So especially when it's the first game of the season, teams are not quite into full form or as sharp as they'd like to be, and in San Jose's style kind of mucks up the game a little bit and makes it difficult, and you have to be really disciplined and you have to be really good with the ball, and it just makes for a very awkward game. So that's their style, and it works for them.
Okay, so Alex Morgan, not a very flattering clip about the Earthquakes. So basically, teams know that they're going to be in for a sloppy game every single time they come in and play the Earthquakes. Is this what the Matias Almeida system is just a way to fully disrupt teams and get them completely off their game and force them to play a sloppy game and try to even the playing field in terms of quality, when you got a team that has 2 of the players in the top MLS 50 on the field in Altidore and Pasuelo, and MLS says the Quakes have none? Is this how Matias Almeida levels the playing field and frustrates opponents?
Yeah, not flattering at all, the comments. You could tell that he was frustrated. Look, I think when Matias' system is working well, when it's at its best, it creates really exciting soccer that is, quick, fast pace. But in a game like this, when it's not at its best, it was pretty sloppy. They're trying to force errors from Toronto, and they just about did that, managed to nip the draw there in the end. But look, I think it's a somewhat unfair criticism from the perspective of the fan. I think it's exciting and fun to watch, but I have to imagine as an opposing coach, it's difficult, especially in the first game of the season. He also talked about that, how it's tough to go to San Jose on the first day of the season because they play completely differently than any other team in the league. So it's tough to specifically prepare for them.
This is what I think about this comment that Greg Vanney made. I don't know I don't know what coaches are saying amongst themselves. I'm sure there's a coach network somewhere on
Oh,
They're all on LinkedIn.
there
and
might be, yeah,
connected together.
they may be sharing text
Or
left and
WhatsApp,
right,
probably.
or WhatsApp. Well, look, I think there is a bit of jealousy in this league against Matias Almeida. I think specifically the old coaches club feel some sort of, yeah, like I said, jealousy towards this peculiar style that Matias puts forward. Why? Maybe because they can't replicate it, or because they don't have.
they can't beat it.
They can't beat it, or because they don't have enough smarts to build something like that. To be honest with you, that's the point of view that I have on this. There's no reason for Vanny to say such despicable comments, but it is what it is. I wish I could have asked him a little bit more about it, to be honest with you, and I'm sure we'll see comments like this.
It's not the first time.
It's not the first time. We'll see more.
Bob Bradley, right?
We'll
I
see
remember
more.
last
Let's see
year.
what Bruce Arena has to say about Matias. I'm sure he has something really, really bad to say about his system and how flawed he thinks it is. But I think the opposite. I think Almeida's style was more than needed in this league. It adds a different element. It adds a huge element of surprise, and it adds a lot of value to the league. So, I don't see that was completely out of pocket from Vanny.
The ultimate way to respond is on the field.
Yeah. And last year we saw a Quakes offense that within this system was clicking. They were winning the ball higher up the pitch as compared to 2018 when they were having very little success, where they were sitting a lot deeper. And they were immediately creating shot after shot after shot. And when they were at the most successful, we've said on the show many times, was when they were shooting the most. Today they weren't generating those shots. And our question to Matias Almeida afterwards was, what do you chalk this up to? Is it first game jitters? Is it a lack of an understanding? And my concern with this, that I talked with Jesse Fiorinelli in the elevator down to Matias Almeida's press conference about, was that why so much change to this lineup?
Yeah.
Take us through some of the changes, Alex, that was introduced in this lineup that weren't even done in preseason. And while we weren't present, we know people who were, and I checked and they said, yeah, this was not what the Quakes did. Jesse said, this is what the team has been working on for the last 10 days, is this particular configuration of players. It was quite different than I think we expected, even though we knew the right starting lineup, and we mentioned it on the last show. Not the configuration we were expecting.
Last week on the show, we predicted the personnel, the 11 men that would be on the field, but the big change was that Danny Husen playing wide left instead of up top. Then you have Rios playing up top in the 9 role.
Instead of the 10.
Instead of the 10. And then, who's it? Vaco in the middle, playing as a 10. And that's a different setup. We've seen Danny play on the wing, either wing, I think, at various points throughout his Quakes career. But I don't believe that Matias Almeida has utilized that much before. And my guess is that it is a Toronto-specific move, that he was making the move specifically with a tactical advantage over Toronto in mind. He and Husen were communicating a lot on the sidelines during the game. So that's my guess, but we'll have to see going forward as to whether it's a more permanent change.
You think this is mainly tactical for Toronto, or you think we might be seeing the return of target winger Danny Husen? What are your thoughts here, Joel?
I don't know. It's tough to say. I think that the preseason pattern tells us that it was intentional, not solely based on playing against Toronto. Husen had been starting with Rios up top. Husen had been, singled out as that target winger, which we've seen in the past, as you said, different stages throughout his career here in San Jose. He's got to play his cards. Matias played his cards well today. I thought, the team didn't put things forward as neatly as they've done in the past. But I think Almeida was doing the right things. He made the right substitutions at the right times, I think. Bringing in Shea, even though he wasn't really an impact player, was a good boost. As we know, Shea is an energetic player, and he also forced Nick to go to the right side, which I think is fruitful for the team when it works out. In addition to that, you had Wando, who was a spark, right off the bench. He playing with that chip on his shoulder, wanting to prove himself. First ball goes out after it, head first. These are the type of things that you need when you call players and you summon players from the bench. Now, obviously, the team was not able to really categorize on those said substitutions, but I don't think we can really we don't know what Matias is going to play week in and week out. I think it's going to vary this season, knowing that teams around the league, coaches around the league know what he's putting forward, what his style of play looks like now. I think it's going to be more of a guessing game for us and for everyone else.
Now that he has more options going forward too, you have Fierro, you have Rios, you have Danny, you have Wando, and you have Espinosa. Those are 5 guys, I think, that can all play.
And Varco as well.
And Varco, sorry. 6 guys that can play in those 4 positions.
He likes to change the configuration, and we've seen the players kind of do it on their own throughout the game. I commented to you at some point in the game that Carlos Fierro, when he came in, was playing on the left wing, and in a particular situation, he's all the way over on the right side of the pitch. And so,
and don't forget about Eriksson too. I think I forgot to add Eriksson.
Yeah,
to that list.
Eriksson dropping a bit deeper. And one of the observations pointed out to me on Twitter was that it felt like there was a double pivot with Jackson Ewell. Although my observations were that it was a little bit more of him and Vaco kind of interchanging that 8 and the 10 at different times.
But I'll say this: I think that today's game and moving forward will desperately need Jutson in order to survive. I think the Quakes desperately need him. They have him. I don't know if he might still be dealing with an injury. He might still be recuperating. But he was vital last season. He's a spine of the team. They'll definitely need him moving forward, and not only to bring stability and fill that huge gap that was present today, but also to elevate Jackson Ewell's game. I thought today Jackson Ewell was too quiet. I thought he was far too back. He's a player that offers a little more going forward as well, and today was just a quiet 90 minutes for him. Also, I guess you can argue that Florian deserves to be in the starting 11, although I did feel that Kasha was able to redeem himself with a couple of last-second sliding tackles that went his way. But yeah, I think next week, Jutson needs to start.
Yeah.
And look, Jackson Ewell is not a natural 6. I think he's a more natural 8 or even 10, pushing forward more. Last year, we noticed that defensively he improved a lot, but then with this second goal, you see he's sort of getting caught in no man's land, stepping to a ball that he can't win, and then Toronto go right back down the gap. So it'll also be tricky given that he's going to be gone with the national team. So that's another reason why the Quakes will need Judson a lot. Judson in that 6 role in Matias Almeida's system is a more natural fit to me.
I don't know how comfortable I feel about Magnus Eriksson assuming that 8 role though for good. I think he's a little too shaky, and to be honest with you, I've noticed that his speed has diminished over the years.
He's never been a fast player.
He's never been a fast player, that's for sure. But I feel like he's gone a bit slower. I don't know if you guys noticed that yourselves.
Well, you have Jackson Ewell, who is. We talked to him this week in the midweek press conference, who seems very confident that Greg Berhalter is going to be asking him to play for the U23s. The Quakes are going to have to get by without Jackson Ewell. So even if Judson returns in the 6th, which I'm sure the decision today was probably mostly related to fitness, and the fact that he didn't play very much at all in preseason except for 45 minutes against Sac Republic, feels like we're probably going to need to rely a bit on Magnus Eriksson to play that 8 with Judson at the 6 here, starting after Minnesota United.
And he would be then a converted center midfielder, because he's not a center midfielder by trade. That's for sure.
Right.
No more Anibal Godoy this year. He's been the guy that the Quakes have leaned on for the last couple of years. Now he's gone in Nashville. So the Quakes really don't have many center midfield
And there was
options.
never a clear replacement, by the way, for Godoy.
Yeah.
There never was.
Maybe the biggest gap on this team, and we've talked about this for how many years now, is that they don't really have that true 10 playmaker in the middle of the pitch. Now, as Ian Russell enlightened us a bit in our interview with him. And if you haven't caught that yet, I'd like to just say, please go watch that interview. It's excellent, and Ian does a really good job in taking some of the information about Matias Almeida's system and helping us understand it in a deeper way than maybe we've been able to in the past. From a coaching perspective, we know Almeida likes to play through his wingers, but they still really feels like they kind of lack that creative spark in the middle of the pitch. It's great to have Rios on the pitch. He scored 3 goals in preseason, got another goal today. It's great to have all this talent, but it feels like some players are sometimes in mismatched configurations.
That player was supposed to be Vaco all along.
And he got his chance in the middle of the pitch today.
He's had his chances throughout the 4 years that he's been here, but to be honest with you, he's lost the opportunities himself due to poor performances, due to complacency, due to just not putting in the work day in and day out. I just think that Vaco should be that solution in theory, but he's not. And the Quakes do have that profile within the roster, right? So they don't really have to go out and get him. Now, obviously with Vaco not, paying dividends, you have to convert one of your players into that. And they've decided to go with, in this case, Rios in a way.
Who's not really a 9 or a 10.
He's not creative. He's not the best with his feet. If anything, I mean, he's more of a finisher than anything else, but I wouldn't even categorize him as a perennial finisher either. So
but he has scored 4 goals now, if you include the 3 preseason goals. Is Andy Rios looking a lot more comfortable on this team than what we saw from him last season, Alex?
Absolutely. Last season, he was never really able to integrate into the system. He didn't even look that much better than Carlos Fierro. He looked lost, exactly. But he was definitely one of the Quakes' most strongest presences going forward. This game, he was muscling up against their center backs and distributing the ball. I think it left something to be desired for me, but at least he showed up, whereas Vaco just didn't today.
Now, fans, we all know that if Charles was here, he'd be telling you to get those questions in, that this is your show, and we're going to take your questions here in just a minute. But before we get into that, Joel Soria, Minnesota United is a team that seems to have Matias Almeida's number. The Quakes played them twice last season.
Beat them twice.
2 losses, right?
Yeah.
So it feels like the Quakes have something they need to prove against Minnesota United, who finished, in the playoff race, kind of in a similar mid-table or mid-playoff spot like Toronto FC was able to land. Feels like, a bit of the same quality that we saw from Toronto today. We can expect something similar from Minnesota United. What's your take on how Minnesota United did their offseason and what the Quakes have in store for them next week?
I think Minnesota did a couple of crucial signings and towards the tail end of last season, bringing in the Uruguayan. Minnesota is a team that has proven to be effective both on the road and at home, specifically at home. They have a well-placed system with Adrian Heath. I don't think they really lack on any particular portion of the field. I think at the end of the day, though, the Quakes, what's really going to make or break the Quakes is the internal feelings, right? The emotional momentum. I think that's what really could either propel or regress San Jose this season. They're going to be certainly riding a high heading into next week's match. They're going to have to use that to their advantage. I mean, we felt it at Avaya tonight. 18,000 roaring.
A sellout.
Roaring together after Alanis' goal. The players treating a draw like a win. Matias Almeida happy for his players. The players happy with themselves and their performance, but at the same time recognizing their flaws. I mean, these are the type of self-assessments that this team's going to have, all while still keeping that inertia, that positive inertia that could potentially give them that slight advantage that they'll have against teams that on paper they might, that on paper don't really have them as winners.
Yeah. I think that's all true, but I'm still not very confident that the Quakes will be able to get a result against Minnesota United. Last year, Minnesota, Adrian Heath absolutely had San Jose's number. They won 3-0 out of Ice Stadium, comprehensively dismantled the Quakes, and then 3-1 in Minnesota. So last year the matchup was not good for the Quakes, and I think they're going to struggle if they play the way they did today next weekend.
I mean, if you want to focus in on it, really, who does the pressure lie on in this situation? The pressure is certainly on Minnesota, right? If you really, really want to look into that specific matchup, I don't think anyone's looking at, next week's matchup with that much, detail. But, like I said, I think the Quakes do have a solid chance. Most, as we know, and I'll say this, I don't like to generalize, but most games in MLS are toss-ups.
Especially early in the season.
They're coin flips. Yeah. I think this is going to be one of those.
Yeah. I think the pressure is actually on you to get a better quote from Adrian Heath than you were able to get last season, because that goes about as viral as an MLS tweet goes.
He got his signings. I think he's a happy man now.
So, fans, again, thank you so much for tuning in, and we apologize for kind of the last-minute change on the times. We got into the middle of the press conference and realized we weren't going to be able to get back to the studio and get started at 6 o'clock, but thank you for showing up and joining us. We've got some questions.
Take a couple questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So Brian Hoovler says, Happy New Season and welcome back. Thank you.
Thank you.
We are very happy to be back, especially you. You've not been able to join us for our first couple of shows here. A draw seems like a fair result given the run of play. From Brian's perspective, what are your biggest positives and negatives from this game, Alex?
Biggest positive's got to be Alanis, his free kick ability, and then generally, I think Joel said he was your man of the match. He was my man of the match as well. Playing at center back, he looked solid, able to distribute the ball well. Defensively, I think he will take this team to another level. So that's definitely the biggest positive. I'd say the thing I'm most concerned about is just general lethargy. They at times didn't push the tempo in the middle. They're best going forward when they are tight to their man and trying to pick those balls off in midfield. And they only did that at times.
In transition quickly.
Exactly. They only did that at times this game. Even in the second half, when they had most of possession and were trying to push forward late on, they didn't have that edge. So that's concerning to me.
Joel?
Same. My positive, Alanis, and I would also add the atmosphere out of Ice Stadium. I thought it was electric. Negatives, the lethargy, the sluggishness from the Quakes. I don't think that this brand is specifically the brand that we saw last year. I think they still have a lot of things to work on. It shouldn't be an excuse. The offseason shouldn't be an excuse. This team should have came forward a bit more fortified. They should have offered a better product. Hopefully that happens sooner rather than later, because it could eventually backfire on them.
Do you think maybe they were hurt a little bit by focusing a lot of the preseason against some lower division teams in Mexico as well as USL teams?
And
that made them less prepared for an MLS opponent?
That possibly did hamper them. I personally would want the highest level of opponents as possible, right? And I think, who was it? Seattle Sounders, for instance, traveled to Mexico. They were hoping to get a couple Liga MX sides, and they ended up settling for a couple of second flight teams. I think the Quakes next preseason, moving forward, needs to try and set some dates with some better opponents.
I don't know if that'll happen, though. I think this was probably a very conscious decision by Matias Almeida not to play any public matches, not to show what he's doing.
His hand to MLS.
Exactly, and I think the only way that he'd be able to schedule those big matches if they are open to the public. They didn't play any this year. I think that was the first time in my time covering the team that they didn't have any public open preseason matches open to the public. So I don't see that changing. I think that must have been conscious decision unless he, regrets doing that this year.
But if you really want to assess, the abilities of your team, you have to go and play the best. I mean, sometimes it will humble you. And I think in this case, it probably would have humbled the Quakes greatly, given the fact that, they fell short against some of these teams.
Right.
But that's how you calibrate the team. You have to go out there and you have to play the best. If we look at, any other league in the world, for instance, Premier League teams, they're going and they're playing friendlies against the best. La Liga sides are playing against the best in other European countries. You have to do the same here. The Mexican teams do it as well. You have to go up against the best. It gives you a good outline of where you're at. I think next year they have to do it. I think that could have played a factor tonight.
Okay. Next question from Trevor Wojcik. Was the Joel Magnus pairing temporary? Is Judson not match fit? We covered this already a bit, but we did have that Joel Magnus, and we were afraid that's what we were going to see, and particularly, I think, in front of the tandem of Alanis and Kasia rather than Judson. We talked about this a bit before, but how do you think the pairing itself went today and their ability to work together?
It was a little disjointed. I don't think they're particularly used to playing with each other, and you definitely noticed that defensively, as we've talked about, there was a gap. There was a gap at the back. Neither of them are defensive-minded players. And it's definitely temporary, given that Joel will be called up to the U.S. Men's national team at some point, the Olympic squad. And so we suspect that Judson, given he had limited minutes in preseason, is not match fit, as you say. And he was in the 18, so hopefully we'll be able to be reintegrated into the lineup soon.
Good sign that he's in the 18, and we were told by Matias Almeida midweek that he was practicing at the same level as his teammates, Joel Soria. Judson's just so critical for this club in this system of Matias Almeida. Is the biggest issue facing the Quakes maybe what would happen if Judson went down with a more serious injury?
I think so. I think if it came down to that, the Quakes would have to make an emergency signing or trade.
Oh, absolutely.
Without a doubt. I don't think the Quakes can stay afloat without Judson. They were able to show that they were able to do that today, but I think moving forward as the season moves on and as, minutes start carving into players' legs, I think the Quakes will desperately need, a linchpin in the back like Judson, who's able to orchestrate and lead the way from the back and really connect that vital midfield with the defenders. Without Judson, the Quakes just don't have a spine.
I mean, given that it's an Olympic year and that we expect Joel to be gone, I'm actually surprised that the Quakes didn't make any signings in the central midfield, or that they've left that position somewhat shallow in depth.
Okay. Jose asks, why do we keep trying with Vaco? We did see a point last season where when he looked like he was motivated due to his Georgia national team snub, that he really kind of stepped in, and he got I think he had 8 goals, but all of them were through right in the middle of the season, a couple of those in very key games against the Galaxy and such. He was the spark that actually, I believe, allowed the Quakes to be able to have the type of run that they did in the middle of the season. Why is it that he's so hot and cold, Joel?
He's a spotty player by design. That's just that's been the Vaca way since he was a youngster in Europe. If you look at his game logs with Vitesse, it tells you the same thing. It paints you the same picture, to be honest with you. Why do they keep going back to Vaco? Simply because they pay him too much not to go back to him. $1.5 million goes and is directly linked, to his account. You have to play him. You have to give him the benefit of the doubt. He does show up when he wants to, and that's the crucial thing, is just convincing him mentally that he can actually go out and carry, solid performances day in and day out. I think Matias was able to get in his brain and flip that switch last season during the summer when, the Quakes were everyone within the Quakes was feeling that resurgence. But as soon as they started to slip, notice how, Vaco's decline kind of signaled something throughout the team, and both just started declining at the same time. A bit ironic there, but Vaco knows how much pressure is on his shoulders. He knows that the fan base expects a ton from him. But I think when it comes to it, he decides to turn his back and not face the reflectors, and to go out the back door, the easy way out.
It's definitely mental, I think. I don't know if Matias Almeida has been able to figure out how to motivate Vaco. I don't know if Vaco knows how to motivate Vaco. He's a fairly inward person. He's quiet. He doesn't like to speak to the media even after he's scored. I don't think that Matias has, based on this performance, been able to figure out exactly how to push his buttons in the right way.
His talents are through the roof, though. I think if you were to ask me who are the most talented players in the league, I think Vaco would be in my top 15 without a doubt. Mm-hmm. I mean, the skill that he has with the ball, reflects that of George Best. I mean, he had a
similar Best-like goal.
It's ironic. It's ironic that he did pull off a George Best-esque goal. Mm-hmm. But no, he really is truly skilled. He's still relatively young, 26 years of age, I believe. Still has a lot ahead of him, but he's just going to have to convince himself that, his skill that he is actually in control of his skill, and that he can actually dictate what Vaco looks like on the field. It's a tough ask because, we don't know what's going on internally.
That's why you give him a chance, because he can be a game changer, because last year he showed how good he can be and how can be the heart of this midfield and the heart of this team. But thus far it's not been there.
And another question here from Lance Evans actually did want to talk a little bit about Cade Cowell making it to the 18. So great question, Lance. Thank you for asking it. Does Cade Cowell making it to the 8-man game day squad mean we could see him soon instead of Fierro? I know you guys on the last podcast mentioned that the team is impressed with him. I'll just give you my quick 2 cents on this, which is from the information that I was given about the preseason games. Cade Cowell is sitting number 2 behind Christian Espinoza, and to me, this, I think, putting him in the 18 today was a statement that, hey, these young homegrowns, they're starting to get there. And I think part of that is a reward for the type of preseason that Cade Cowell's had. What would it mean, Joel, if he could actually get on the field this season and be able to show some of that? What would that mean to this club?
I think he is going to see playing time. I don't know. I don't think it's a question of if, but of when. I think it's going to happen sooner rather than later. Obviously, all depending on what the results say and speak about this team. But if he doesn't get MLS minutes anytime soon, he's certainly going to get them by the time that round 4 of the U.S. Open Cup comes around. He has the build of a professional soccer player, despite being 15, 16 years of age. He has the knack to score goals. I don't know if he's going to be scoring goals in bunches coming from the right side. I doubt it. I wouldn't see it. But like I said, and I said it last show, we saw what he was able to show. We saw his capabilities when he took the field against Rayados, who at that time and even now, even though at this point in time they're sitting dead last in Liga MX, they're one of the most expensive teams in Latin America, in all the Americas. He was able to put a goal behind them in like 5-10 minutes after being on the field. I mean, it's remarkable. I think he has a future. The world's his oyster. Let's see what he does with it. But I do think that the opportunities will come.
Well, and look, I think it's also, it's indicative of a broader trend. There's a broader trend at play, which is that it would be validation of this system that Jesse Fiorinelli is developing, signing young homegrown players at the age of 14, 15, 16. he's taking a gamble. He's taking a risk on these young players, and to show that one of them would be ready to break into this first team at the age of 16, just barely 16, is an important proof of concept.
Yeah, they're using roster spots on people like Cade Cowell and the other homegrowns that are mainly playing for the academy in Reno.
And they have a lot to prove, right? This youth academy setup hasn't really been fruitful yet, right? It's all been just for lack of words, but propaganda, really. I mean, there isn't anything concrete that says this model is going to be effective and the next big thing for the Quakes. They're not there yet, but maybe Cade Cowell can open those floodgates for them on that end.
Yeah, and just as a reminder, in case you're looking at Tommy Thompson and Nick Lima, they were not actually developed by the Earthquakes, right? The USSDA current academy model didn't really exist in its current form in the time that they were going through their teenage years. And so they had to meet just certain criteria to be able to call it homegrown.
Neither was Cade, neither was Gilbert, neither was Jacob.
True, they were
first
found
is
by other clubs.
Marcinkowski.
Yeah, they were found by other clubs. JT is the closest thing to a truly developed player by the Earthquakes, where he was, according to John Bush, he was joining Earthquakes practices when he was 15 years old. Yeah. So,
look, the Quakes just need one guy like Gianluca Busio, and then that Jesse Fiorinelli looks like a genius. But right now, I don't see guys like Jacob or Gilbert getting much closer to starting lineup, given the options the guys at the Quakes have.
They're
in front of
USL
them.
bound, I'm sure.
Yeah, they're USL for at least for this season. I'd like to combine a part of the question here from Brian Hoovler, which is, given the inconsistency, should the club look to move Vaco this summer if Almeida can't get him performing? I'm going to add one more thing onto that. I'd like to talk about Carlos Fierro a little bit as well, because Lance Evans' question also talked about Fierro. Let's talk about both of these guys right now, because they both, in many ways, are on thin ice and have been. I think Carlos Fierro saw the field today, Joel Soria, but at the same time, keep in mind that we have him third on the depth chart. We mentioned that last week. The reason that he got on was because Matias wanted to sub the left wing position, and he already had subbed on Shea Salinas into a left back position, thereby had to go another level deeper in order to get Fierro onto the field. Last week, when we did our preseason show, we had mentioned that Fierro was third on the depth chart, that he wasn't really getting time in the Sacramento and Reno games, and I was able to get some more information that said that what he was actually doing was backing up Rios in Rios' position behind Huson. So he's really playing more like the 10 spot. That's not a good sign, Joel, because he's not a 10. So clearly he's low on this depth chart. Given the performance of people like Vaco and Fierro, should Almeida have a quick hook of these guys? And if they don't turn it around by mid-season, should the Quakes be trying to look to move them?
I doubt it. I really do. I think the ethos within the locker room is family, right? It's all about family. It's all about unity. And I think it'll stay that way until the end of the season, when the Quakes do ship out, a plethora of players.
Quite a few.
But till then, I think that both Fierro and Vaco will remain in contention to start. I'll say that. Will they start? I'm sure both of them probably won't see the field together for some time. I don't know if that will ever happen. But both players, as you said, are on thin ice, in my opinion. I think Vaco, as I said before, should be a player that should be racking up 10 goals, 5 assists per season, no less than that, given, the DP status that he has within the team, given his wages, given his past, given what he's shown with the Quakes just last year. He can be an effective player in this league. He has loads of talent, but he decides to shut off mentally, and that's what hurts him the most. I think with Fierro, it's a little more complicated. Like, Fierro has had a crazy career, for lack of better words. Starting up here, plummeting and having a quick resurgence and then falling again. It's been a roller coaster for him, really. A career that started at 16 years of age, that had him linked to Barcelona after the 2011 U17 World Cup, and then turned out to be turned out to be a Liga MX lifer up until now. He's only 25, 26 years of age, but it doesn't seem like he's going to be the Fierro that he once was, to be honest. I don't think we're ever going to see that from him ever again. Hopefully he can turn it around. I mean, he's a professional. He's had a tough past as well. Spoke to him prior to the season, lost his brother at an early age. That really hurts him. Was dealing with a back injury, according to him, over the offseason prior to him joining the Quakes, and obviously that's gonna limit his abilities on the field one way or the other. He's gonna have to get over that, and hopefully he can put some formidable performances for the Quakes.
And one important thing to consider, and I think it was The Athletic that mentioned this in one of their articles that they wrote about the Quakes, is that 2021. Next winter is actually a more natural transition period for the Quakes, given the contracts and the contract structures that they have, than this offseason was. I think, according to Colin Etnier's San Jose Earthquakes contract spreadsheet, according to what we know, it is likely Vaco's final year of his contract. I believe that's the case.
It has to be.
So if he doesn't put in a good performance this year, I can't see that being renewed. I don't know if they try to ship him out during the summer, if they could get any transfer value for that, if it's looking like at the end of the year he'll be gone anyways. But I'm not sure about that. And then Fierro likely still has a lot of time on his contract left.
Probably not much.
So, real quick, just want to add this piece. I think Vaco, when he does leave, will have a lot of suitors lined up. He has a pretty powerful agent behind him who is well connected in the European market. I don't think he'll struggle to find a new home if that does arise.
Well, fans, that's our show for the evening. Thank you so much for joining us. After the Quakes get a last-second 2-2 draw, I literally think the referee went up to Magnus and said, "This is it. This is it. This is all you're getting." And if they didn't score in that situation, then the game was definitely going to be over. So the Quakes salvaged the 2-2 draw. Minnesota United next up for the Earthquakes next week. Not sure about Charles Wollin's status. Our status is this. There will be no mid-week show for this week. So look for us to have our next show next week. We'll get back to you as to whether that will be another post-game show or whether we will come back with our regular midweek show next week. Our executive producer is Jason Sholl. Our producer is Aaron Sholl. For Alex Morgan, for Joel Soria, I'm Jamon Moore. Charles Wollin covering the Roots tonight. If you didn't get a chance, check in to his coverage of the Oakland Roots as they were taking on Chattanooga. Thank you so much for joining us, and good night.